they're going to make Google Assistant go right into Bard. And Google Assistant is already used by hundreds of millions of people. So I think that Google will roll. I think they're going to roll ChatGPT.
I don't know who's going to win, but I'm looking at this Saxipoo more reductively as a capitalist, which is what are people's incentives? Because that's what they'll do. Google's incentive is to usurp ChatGPT's usage by inserting something inside of their existing distribution channels to suppress the ability for you to want to go to the app.
Known as bundling.
I think Facebook has that same incentive. Oddly, even though Microsoft is such a deep partner, I think certain assets of Microsoft have that incentive. You're talking collectively about $5 or $6 trillion of market cap. Then when you add in Alexa and Amazon and Siri and Apple, what is their incentive? I don't think their incentive is to let this happen. And I think if you look at the Slack Microsoft Teams example of even a better engineered product who's excellent and widely deployed, even at hundreds of millions of users, doesn't much matter when it's more cleverly distributed and priced. And so those things, again, you may still be right. All I'm saying is it's just so early to know. And as slow and lumbering as some of these big companies are, they are not so stupid as to kill their own golden goose and or defend it when threatened. So I think you just have to let it see what happens. As an investor, I think it's important to just stay a little patient because it's not clear to me that there are any natural blockers. But I do think that David's right, that it's demonstrating a use case that's important. But it's still so early. We are 6 weeks in.
If you look at certain data sets, Reddit, Stack Overflow for programming, and Quora, these things are going to be worth a fortune. And to be able to buy those or get exclusive licenses to those, if you're Google Bard or if you're ChatGPT, that could be a major difference maker. Twitter's data set, obviously. And then you look at certain tools like Zapier and if this and that. They've spent a decade building the sort of Meta API. That would be an incredible blocker. I think this is going to be like a balkanization of
I'll be honest
so many
with you,
oil sources.
Zapier already did it for free. They did a plugin for free.
Exactly. I was just going to say, I don't think these are not blockers. I don't think this is the ace of hearts on a flush board. I don't think so. We were both right at the beginning of social networking. Sax started Genie. I was in the middle of AIM. And all of a sudden, we saw Reed start SocialNet. Then we saw Friendster get started. Then we saw MySpace get started. And you have to remember, when you look back now, 20 years later, the winner was the seventh company, which was Facebook. Not the first, not the second. It was the seventh, which started 2.5 years properly after the entire Web 2.0 phenomenon started.
Yeah. Same with search, by the way, where Google was probably 20th to the scene.
Yeah, Excite, Lycos.
If you want to be a real student of business history, I'll just say something that's more meta, which is if there's something that I've learned on the heels of this SVB fiasco, is that there is an enormous amount of negative perception of Silicon Valley, and frankly, a lot of disdain for VCs and prognosticating technologists. If you make the bets too early, you typically don't make all the money. And it tends to be the case, and it has been in the past at least, with these transformative moves, it's sort of in the early third of the cycle is where the real opportunities to make the tons of money emerge. And there's a lot of folks that show you a path and then just don't necessarily capture the value. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case here. All I'm saying is if history is a guide, all of these other big waves have shown that fact pattern. And so I'm very excited and I'm paying attention, but I'm just being circumspect with this idea that, having been in the middle of these couple of waves before it, I made all the money by waiting a couple of years. I don't know if that's going to be true this time around, but that's sort of my posture. I think the problem at Google is not Sundar or Larry or Sergey. I think it's more in the deep bowels of middle management of that company, which is that there's just far too many people that probably have an opinion, and their opinion is not shrouded in survival. Their opinion is shrouded in elite language around what is the moral and ethical implications of this, and where has this been properly tested on the diaspora of 19 different ethnic tribes of the Amazon. That's the kind of decision-making that is a nice to have when you are the second or third most valuable technology company in the world. But you have to be able to pause that kind of thinking and instead get into wartime survival mode. And it's very hard. So it doesn't almost matter at this point what Sundar wants. The real question is, what is the capability of middle management to either do it or get out of the way? And I think that in all of these big companies that struggle, what you really see is an inability for middle management to get out of the way, or frankly, just you need somebody to then fire them. And if you look at folks who get their groove back, let's see what Facebook does. What are they targeting? They're targeting middle management. If you look at what Elon does in the companies that he owns, there is virtually no middle management. It's like, get out of the way.
Build product
And ship it.
Yeah.
And what is the core truth? And so if failure is there in front of you, and if David is right that you have 200 million users come out of nowhere who are voting every day with their time and attention to use an app, and that doesn't create a five-alarm fire where you get middle management out of the way and you are the senior most people talking to the people doing the work and shipping things every day, you are toast.
I am employed as a 3D artist at a small games company of 10 people. Our team is 2 people, he basically explains. He says since Midjourney version 5 came out, he's not an artist anymore, nor a 3D artist. All they do is prompting, photoshopping, and implementing good-looking pictures. And he basically says this happened overnight, and he had no choice. His boss also had no choice. He says, I am now able to create, rig, and animate a character that's spit out from MJ, Midjourney, in 2 to 3 days. Before, it took us several weeks in 3D. The difference is that he cares about his job, and for his boss, it's just a huge time money saver. He's no longer making art. And the person who was number 2 in the organization who didn't make as good content as him is now embracing this technology because it curries favor with his boss. And he ends basically saying, getting a job in the game industry is already hard, but leaving a company and a nice team because AI took my job feels very dystopian. I doubt it would be better in a different company also. I am between grief and anger, and I am sorry for using your art, fellow artists.
This is yet another reason that Figma really needs to close this acquisition from Adobe. I mean, it's like the value of these apps are just getting gutted. If you take a workflow management tool for things like design and imagery and you reduce it by an order of 90%, it's like, what is that app experience worth? And how could you replicate it if you were a big company that already has distribution? That's one comment. But what I would tell you, Jason, to answer the white collar question is I think there are a handful of companies you need to look at exclusively because they will be the first ones to really figure out how to displace human labor. And that is TCS, so Tata Consulting Services, Accenture, Cognizant. These are all the folks that do coding for hire work at scale. I think Accenture has something like 750,000 employees. So the incentive to sort of squeeze OpEx, to create better utilization rates, to increase profitability is quite obvious. It always has been. They will be the first people to figure out how to use these tools at scale. Before the law firms or the accounting firms or any of those folks even sort of try to figure out how to displace white-collar labor, I think it's going to be the coding jobs and it's going to be the coding for hire jobs that companies like Accenture and TCS.
So those business processing
do for other people.
Developer kind of folks, they're going to need half as many people, 25% as many people.
AI is going to eliminate unit testing. It has already done so. It's going to eliminate most forms of coding. The engineers that you have, all of them will now become 10x engineers. So with fewer of them or with the same number, you'll be able to do as much or more than you could have before. That's a wonderful thing. And all I'm saying on that specific narrow vertical is you'll see it first rear its head in companies like Accenture and TCS and Cognizant because they have an immediate incentive to use this tooling to drive efficiency and profitability that's rewarded by shareholders. It'll be less visible in other companies. But what I am saying, though, is that you have to think about the impact on the end markets for a second. And I think that AI does something that other technology layers have never done before, which is supplant human judgment in a closed loop manner. And I just think it's worth appreciating that there are many systems and many jobs that rely on human judgment where we deal with error bars and an error rate that a computer will just destroy and blow out of the water. And we will have to ask ourselves, Should this class of job exist with its inherent error rate, or should it get replaced fully by a computer which has no error rate? And I think that's an important question that's worth putting on the table. Today, we use radiologists and pathologists to identify cancers.
Yep.
There are closed loop systems. We have one right now that's in front of the FDA. That is a total closed loop system that will not need any human input. So I don't know what those folks do. Except what I can tell you is that we can get cancer detection basically down to a 0% error rate. That is not possible with human intervention. That is judgment.
Right.
So I just think it's important to really acknowledge that this is happening at a level that it's never happened before. You may be right that there's some amazing job for that radiologist or pathologist to do in the future. I don't know offhand what that is, but these are closed loop systems now that think for themselves and self-improving. I'll give you a totally different example. How many pilots are there in the world? Will we, at some point in the next 10 years, want folks to actually manually take off and land, or will we want precision-guided instrumentation and computers and sensors that can guarantee a pitch-perfect landing every single time in all kinds of weather conditions, so that now planes can even have 50x the number of sensors with a computer that can then process it and act accordingly? Just a random example that isn't even thought of when we talk about sort of where AI is going to rear its head. I think that this judgment idea is an important one to figure out, because this is the first time I've seen something that is bumping up against our ability to have judgment. And what this person was talking about in this Midjourney example is his judgment has been usurped. We're definitely now on this fuck around, find out curve.
Yeah.
And so there's only one way to really find out, which is somebody's going to push the boundaries. The competitive dynamics will get the better of some startup. They'll do something that people will look back on and say, whoa, that was a bridge too far. So yeah, it's just a matter of time.